Hello, Kris, Green Sabre, Doom Telly, episode 22, I think. I'm losing count because these are coming fucking quick fire at the minute. I've written 22 on my note, so I'm assuming that's what it is. Yeah, 2 videos in a week. I'm really spoiling you guys. So anyway, the reason for the 2 videos is it's a challenge / competition, whatever the fuck they are, frenzy at the moment. The last video was the Rogakovic 660 subscribers challenge. And I'm doing another challenge now. And this is Metal Mickey's 90s death metal challenge. Which essentially, I think the remit is to, I don't know, an alien that's landed, a fucking young hipster metalcore buffoon that doesn't understand what he's listening to, or just in general a fucking idiot that needs 90s death metal explaining to him. The remit is, and I'll get this right, explain to someone who is not in the know 90s death metal in 10 albums. Now, I was very quick to start sort of assembling this list with all my favourites and stuff like that from the 90s. But I watched Metal Mickey's original video and it's very clear. It's not about the best albums. It is about how to explain 90s death metal quickly in 10 albums. So I had a bit of a rethink, obviously. And there's a couple of albums in here which, I mean, they're all decent, but there's a couple that wouldn't be close to my greatest death metal albums of all time. Let's put it that way. So, no, I noticed on Metal Mickey's that he'd done a bit of a geographical thing. I thought that was quite a nice way of doing it. However, I've not really covered wholly the geographical thing. Like, there's not really much mention of European death metal on here for me. There's a little bit. There's not a mention of the New York scene and various others like the sort of Greek scene and blah blah and so on and so forth. It's mainly a kind of, but I have my reasons for it, but I will explain that as I elaborate onwards. So, I'm aiming to try and get this out reasonably quickly. I said that about the last one and it still ended up at nearly fucking 25 minutes, which was comfortably like 5-10 minutes longer than most other fucking people's. So, I'm going to trim the waffle, he says optimistically, and try and rattle through these. So, the Metal Mickey Challenge. Explain 90s death metal in 10 albums to a fucking moron. Anyway, so, I will start as if said moron had come to me. Well, likely in the UK. So I'm going to start with what's closest to home. UK death metal. And the first one I will pull off the shelf straight off the bat, and I've seen this in a couple of these videos, is this masterpiece from My Dying Bride, West Yorkshire's very own My Dying Bride. Yeah, a stellar piece. Now, death doom, yeah, but still death metal. There's a lot of death metal sensibilities on this. And, pardon me, death doom was kind of the British thing back then. Because we're fucking miserable in this country, miserable was a real, I think Metal Mickey hit on it, or it might have been also mentioned in one of the other videos, where there's a difference in genre as well. Now, we're going to cover some of the genres, but the British death metal had a very miserable, doomy feel to it, certainly at the time in the early 90s. Not all of them, there was some straight-up death metal, obviously. But I'm rambling again. I would start them on My Dying Bride, As the Flower Withers. Doomy as hell, yeah, but death metal-y as hell. You know, you've got, what's it called? The one that they almost always played live. Vast Choirs, and you've got Return of the Beautiful as well, and some death metal giants on this album. So I would definitely start them here. I would be sticking with UK and British death metal in particular. And I would then suggest they get themselves listening to this piece of majesty. It is, of course, Hope Finally Died by Decomposed. And yeah, another, I mean, I'm not just showing off this vinyl because I appreciate, I've seen how much this fucking thing goes for now, and it is obscene. I inherited this in a record collection trade for a guitar with a mate. So, yeah, thank you, said mate. Just with this alone, I feel like I came out of that deal much better. But anyway, Decomposed. little unknown gem. I mean, for most of you guys watching this, you'll already be well ahead and know this one. But this was a fantastic release at the time. I feel like I saw them live once. I can't remember where they were, but I feel like I definitely did. Likely Bradford or Manchester. But anyway, I digress. Again, death doomy. Lots of doom metal influence in here. And some really doomy, sludgy, grinding riffs. But some proper straight up death metal on here as well. So this would be, with My Dying Bride and with Decomposed, I think we get the best examples of British death metal. So yeah, so that's why. So that would be my second choice. Once we've moved away from the British Isles, I'd then set them up with some very straightforward death metal. And I would be, and it, for me, and again, the caveat here is 90s. There's a couple of albums that I thought, shit, they definitely need to be in here. But they were 1989 releases. Morbid Angels, Altars of Madness, and Pestilence's Consuming Impulse being two great examples of fucking fantastic records that need to be on some kind of list, but not this one, because they were 1989 and not 90. But we've moved on for the British, and we'll now just go for death metal classics and straight up death metal. And where better place to start than this classic from Autopsy, Mental Funeral. Again, it might be my favourite Autopsy album. If I had to pick one, it would likely be this. Straight up horrible, raw, evil, guttural sounding death metal. And yet ticks all the boxes. Autopsy were one of the best at it for me as well, for just horrible riffs. A bit of an element of doominess, and that's sort of what I loved about Autopsy, was those really grinding, some of the best doom riffs out there. Autopsy. But yeah, I'd say, right, straight up death metal, 90s. You can't go far wrong with this record. Autopsy's Mental Funeral. Not much else to say on that front, really. Sticking with straight up 90s death metal. And Obituary's Finest Hour. Cause of Death. Yeah, what Obituary do brilliantly, but with some added flourishes on top. And I genuinely don't think that Obituary have captured this album ever again. It's not just James Murphy's solos that I've banged on about relentlessly in various other videos that make this unique. And they really do make this unique. James Murphy's solos just give it that extra fucking level that no other Autopsy album, for me personally, has had. But it's not just that. Some of the riffs, some of the ever so slightly proggy nature to like Turned Inside Out and Memories Remain, the last two tracks on this album, the riffs, they sort of come in and out, and there's differences, and they're not technical in any way, but well, you know, they are, they're not just fucking riffs by numbers either, but there's a difference, there's a sort of imagination in the riff writing on this album that I don't really hear on other Obituary albums so much. I don't profess to know the entire back catalogue. There's a little, when they kind of came back, and the last few albums after the End Complete are kind of a bit of a blur to me. I don't really know them properly, but I doubt that they beat this. So this would be, how many have we gone through now? Is that 4? Yeah, this would be the 4th one that I show them. Obituary's Cause of Death, masterpiece. Now, this next one I've chosen because I didn't have the one that I actually wanted to choose in my collection, and I figured I could have inserted an image and blah blah, but I thought, no, I'll stick to the collection. If I've not got it, then I'll find something else that will be a good example. The one I wanted to pick was From Beyond by Massacre, because again, straight up, simplistic, balls out, no fucking around death metal. But I don't have that in the collection. I did used to. I used to have the pressing that had the 7-inch with it, but no more, alas. And it's overly simple for me. For me, you can tell that most of the songs on From Beyond by Massacre are written in like 1985, because they sound just far too simple. They're very crude. They sound like a band just learning the chops, to me personally. I know that sounds awful because it sold a fuck-sight more records than I ever will. But that's just my opinion on Massacre. But if I had it in the collection, it would have been on this list, because I think if you want straight up death metal, you can't really look at much further than that record. And the ones I've mentioned, of course. So in its place is Deicide's debut. Again, much faster pace and more intricate, and with those crazy, like, Kerry King falling down the stairs solos that you get on this record. But a death metal masterpiece, and with that there is no denying. Again, Deicide's finest hour for me personally. The one that followed this, that's name escapes me briefly, had its moments, but none of them have been as consistently good as this record for me. But yeah, you want straight up evil, satanic, death metal done the Florida way, Deicide. You'd be hard pressed to find anything a bit more kind of does what it says on the tin than this. And yeah, brilliant. So no Massacre, so that one took its place, and you know, justifiably so, I would say. Okay, sticking, and yeah, we're still on with the sort of classic death metal feel, and this one is a great album. It's not this band's best. I would say the one that followed this is this band's best album. And they wouldn't be close to any greatest death metal of all time list to me, because I think for the most part they're sort of fairly crude and to the point of being comedic, quite frankly. And anyway, now brace yourself, it's quite a striking cover. I'm talking, of course, about Cannibal Corpse, and this album in particular, Tomb of the Mutilated. It ticks every death metal box. Gore, horrendous artwork, yeah, you know, horrendous in a sort of offensive sense, and yeah, just straight up million mile an hour, really low end guttural death metal vocals, guitar riffs, and compositions that sound almost as if they're right at the fucking edge of their abilities with a lot of these. It just sounds like they're playing too fast to how they can do almost. And yeah. But as far as straight up death metal goes, and if you want a great example of it, then I can't think of one much better than this. Like I say, I think their follow-up, The Bleeding, is Cannibal Corpse's finest hour, personally. I think that's why they struck gold. And Eaten Back to Life and Butchered at Birth before this were all kind of leading up to... This is the first really sort of composed, finished article, I would say, from Cannibal Corpse. Some blinding song titles, which you will all know on here as well. But straight up death metal, Mr. Alien, Mr. Idiot, whoever it is that I'm talking to, yeah, does what it says on the tin yet again, and you can't go far wrong with that 90s death metal. Sticking with the classics, and I've gone with one of their 90s records, not the one that I imagine most people will think of, but I think this is their most accomplished record, where they finally nailed their sound, tweaked it, mastered it, and you hear it on this record. I'm talking about Morbid Angel, of course, but I'm talking about the album Covenant. Very nearly picked Blessed Are the Sick, because it's one of my favourites, but as I mentioned on I think it was my video where I did 10 great albums with fatal flaws, and Blessed Are the Sick was on there, because I just feel that the B-side is confused and unfinished and thrown together. It feels like that for Blessed Are the Sick, they had about 7 finished songs, and then we're collectively scratching their heads thinking, shit, we need another 3. Dig out some old demo ones and a bit of filler. And yeah, and so that is why I wouldn't play them Blessed Are the Sick. I would play them Covenant, because I think this is a better album than Blessed Are the Sick in general. It's more accomplished, it's a more finished, it's a more rounded sound. It's like a grown-up Altars of Madness, I would say, if you will. Altars of Madness is still their finest hour, but again, as I mentioned before, that's 1989 and not 90s. So this is why Covenant got chosen. Fantastic record. Morbid Angel in their pomp. Not their finest hour, but very nearly. So yeah, they get Covenant in their ears. Okay, classic American death metal. I'm now going to move back to Europe fleetingly. And we will, is that 8, 9, 10? Yeah, so the number 8, I would say that they have to check out Swedish death metal, and they have to check out that. Now, it was a choice between this and, of course, Left Hand Path. I feel is 1989. I've seen some presses that say 90 on it, but 1989. So that was one of the reasons why it didn't get picked. And also, I didn't pick it because I think this album that's coming is better than it, personally. I'm talking about Dismember's Like an Everflowing Stream. And again, I love Left Hand Path. I also love Clandestine, and that nearly got picked in Tomb's sophomore album, if you will. Well, not if you will. It is. It's their second album. Yeah. So it was nearly that. But I just feel that Dismember's Like an Everflowing Stream is all round a better album. It's Dismember's finest hour, comfortably. Let's be honest about that. But they absolutely nail it on this record from every perspective. The riffs, the song construction, the vocals, the guitar sound, tone, and various other things. The track listing, the way that they just get the ups and the downs exactly right. It just flows beautifully as an album, if you will pardon the pun. And also, one of the finest bits of artwork you'll see on a record anywhere there, called Dan Seagrave, who was the fucking master of 90s death metal covers. But yeah, great in every sense. You can't talk about 90s death metal without talking about the Swedish scene. And if I'm going to give them an example of the Swedish scene in one record, it has to be this. It has to be Deathmembers, Like an Everflowing... Deathmembers? Death Heaven, Dismember, Deftones, whoever the fuck I'm confusing it with. Dismember, Like an Everflowing Stream. It's got to be that one. Okay, the last two records that I would play for this fucking moron, and they're going to be... the move from classic straight-up death metal into the more technical chops. And I don't think you can talk about 90s death metal without talking about the move to technical death, because it's vital to that scene. And the one that I'm going to play in first is by arguably the pioneers of the scene, arguably their finest hour. I would argue that, but it's definitely in my top 3 of their records. It is, of course, Death, and the album is Human. This is where death went just fucking global, if you will. I love their early stuff. I love Scream Bloody Gore. I love Leprosy. I love Spiritual Healing. And as we talk now, it might still be my favourite death record. But I'm going to talk about Human, because this is where death kind of just... You can hear it on Spiritual Healing, the album that preceded this one. Where Chuck's wanting to move in a more technical direction. Well, he gets 2 of the masters from Cynic, Sean Reinert, Paul Masvidal, on this album, and turns it up to a fucking 1,000. This is technical death wizardry. It's just fabulous in every sense. The drumming is outrageous on there. The guitar licks and some of the riff construction is just terrifying. It's like, how the fuck do they think of stuff like that? And again... how the track list is plotted out, it just peaks and troughs. It's a brilliantly constructed record by a brilliant set of musicians in a brilliant era of death metal. And that is why, if you're talking about 90s death metal, you cannot ignore this band for a start. But I don't think you can ignore this record. And certainly, I wanted to cover the technical death aspect of it. And I think these guys kind of paved the way. However... some of the absolute masters of it, and the last choice that this person would be being told to go and listen to, is from this band, Atheist. Again, another Florida death metal band. But they took the technical death metal idea and just ran with it, and some of the song construction on it is really fucking confusing. You've really got to try and dissect it and work it out, and some of the rhythm patterns that the drummer's doing on here, it is just technical. It's a technical masterpiece. I mean, there's elements of jazz fusion in this. There's no denying that. I nearly picked Cynic's Focus, but I feel this is more death metal than Cynic's Focus. There is absolutely death metal all over the Cynic album, but there's more of it in here. It is straight up death metal with ludicrous technical chops. Again, this is Atheist's best record for me. Piece of Time's fabulous, but I like this one more. I don't think there's a bad track on it anywhere. I think, again, it all flows brilliantly. And if you're talking about, if somebody wants to know, hey, give me a great example of technical death metal from the 90s, I don't think you can go far wrong with this. So my last choice for them to listen to would be Atheist's Unquestionable Presence. there's a few of these records that I've mentioned that, yeah, would be on my greatest death metal albums of all time list, and will be. I am compiling that video, and you will get to see it at some point before we all fucking die. But I keep doing something else comes up that I want to do. So that's it. Thank you for the challenge, Metal Mickey. I love a great channel. I love watching your videos. And yeah, I thought this was a sort of unique challenge that I wanted to go at. Like I say, I'd started constructing a list, and then until I actually listened carefully to Metal Mickey's instructions, had to kind of reassess said list. I thought, no, he's right. It's not about the greatest death metal albums of the 90s. It's about what paints a picture of what 90s death metal was. I think I've covered that. Yeah, they're all classics. They're all well known. I've not gone off grid and picked some really obscure weird it is. Maybe apart from the Decomposed record, you could say, but I'm covering the British scene there. But yeah, that's it. I'll wrap it up there. Nice, swift 21 minutes. Again, thanks for watching. We'll go back to a more regular format as of next week. Not quite sure which one it will be yet. We've not rehearsed since the last gig because Bri, the drummer's got COVID, so get well soon, Bri. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks for the challenge, Metal Mickey. Really enjoyed the other people's videos that have done this as well, particularly Death Metal Daryl. Yeah, a really good video there, and that's what inspired me to do this one, to be fair. So, yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you next time. Ta-da.